Good evening, everyone. It is now just after 7. This is On Sound City Council for September 28th, 2020. Public attendance at council meetings continues to be restricted at this time. Council meetings can be viewed live in Rogers Cable TV or the Rogers TV website, or viewed the following day on the city's YouTube channel. Individuals who wish to ask a question during public question period can email the city clerk at bbloomfield, that's one word, bbloomfield@onsound.ca by noon the day of the meeting. We did not have a closed session, so we are starting off right now in the open session. All the way down to number 4, I guess. So calling for additional business. If there's anyone on staff, maybe first. Seeing none. Council. Councillor Tamming.
Thank you, Your Worship. Under additional business, I wish to read an open letter to council, which I penned over the weekend. It regards the persistent derogatory conduct of Councillor O'Leary against other councillors, and I'd like to read the open letter as part of additional business.
Anyone else? Seeing none, I'll have sorry, Mary, you.
I'll speak about the MRI.
Okay, here we go. And I'll have a couple of items to speak to that may or may not come out during the meeting. Disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Deputy Mayor O'Leary.
Thank you, Worship. I've had a pecuniary interest in item 12A, as I have shares in a business that's involved in the decision.
Thank you. I also, too, will have a pecuniary interest at 13H under the consent agenda. Is a final approval of a business license. In my professional capacity, I have acted for the owners of Cannabis Grey Bruce. So I think Councillor Merton has the papers tonight at 6A, confirmation of the council minutes. Go ahead.
Through your worship, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Tamming, that the minutes of the regular council meeting held on September 14th, 2020 as printed be adopted.
And all in
favor? Point of order, Your Honor, or Your Worship. I cannot second that particular 6A, and I should have advised Councillor Merton of that. I do have an issue with the minutes. Is now the time to speak to it or later?
You want to pass your sheet there to someone else so they're moved first?
So they have been seconded by Councillor Emily.
Okay, so the minutes have been moved to the regular meeting held on September 14th. I understand, well, I'll call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Opposed? It's one. Councillor Tamming. So Councillor Tamming, a discussion on those?
I believe the minutes are incomplete. Near the end of last meeting 2 weeks ago, Councillor Grigg asked Councillor O'Leary to retract what were insulting comments towards Councillor Merton. Mr. O'Leary refused to retract, refused to apologize. I think any time that a councillor is accused of breaching our code of conduct, which is what that was, I'd like to see the minutes reflect that interaction.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Thanks, Your Worship. I don't think we can let this go by without some further discussion. I think that Councillor Greg was expressing his opinion at the end of that meeting, and I think that you need to put a finer point on your comments as far as that goes. It was Councillor Greg's opinion of the comments. It was not any sort of an overwhelming majority of people considering that that was the case.
That's why I referred to Mr. Greg's opinion, Councillor Thomas.
I'm afraid I don't think you did, and I just want to clarify that point.
Madam Clerk, you would have prepared the minutes. Is that something that would normally go into the minutes?
Through your worship, that is not something we would typically put in, as it was not a decision of council.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to move on to number 7, motion to move council into committee of the whole.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Tamming, that City Council now move into committee of the whole to consider public meetings, deputations and presentations, public question period, matters arising from correspondence, reports of city staff, consent agenda, committee minutes, matters postponed, motions for which notice was previously given, and additional business.
And all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. So we're now in committee of the whole at number 8. We have a public meeting for the community improvement plan. First of all, I declare that the public meeting is open. This is a statutory public meeting pursuant to Section 28, subsection 5 of the Planning Act, which mandates such a meeting prior to the adoption of a community improvement plan. The purpose of the meeting is to give the public an opportunity to ask questions, provide comments, make representations on the proposed community improvement plan. Every person who attends a statutory public meeting required under the Planning Act shall be given an opportunity to make representations in respect of the proposed community improvement plan. If a person or public body would otherwise have an ability to appeal the decision of the City of Owen Sound to local planning appeal tribunal, but the person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Owen Sound before the community improvement plan is adopted, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Owen Sound before the community improvement plan is adopted, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the local planning appeal tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. And with that, I hand it over to the clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Notice of this public meeting was posted on the city's website and published in the Sun-Times on September 4th. The notice of this public meeting required individuals wishing to speak at the meeting to contact the clerk by the end of the day on Friday prior to the meeting. No one contacted me to speak at the meeting, and no one has provided me with a written submission. Any personal information collected at this public meeting is collected under the authority of the Planning Act and the Municipal Act. The information collected will be used to complete the community improvement plan process and will form part of the public record. Questions about this collection should be addressed to myself, the city clerk.
Thank you. So we will now hear from Junior Planner Ms. Eatsy. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, members of council, municipal staff, and members of the public. We are here this evening to hold a public meeting to gain public input on the city's new community improvement plan. So to begin, a community improvement plan is a tool provided under Section 28 of the Planning Act that can enable municipalities to provide grants and loans to stimulate private sector investment in targeted areas of the community. In order to have a CIP, a municipality must have enabling official plan policies and a bylaw to designate a community improvement project area. The City of Owen Sound has both of these tools in place. Some of the benefits of a CIP include promoting revitalization and placemaking and encouraging brownfield remediation and redevelopment. Pictured on this slide is the Owen Sound Family Health Team on First Avenue West. That is just one example of the many properties that has received funding under the CIP. A bit of history on the city's previous CIPs. The first CIP that the city had was in 2005, which offered only brownfield and vacant lands tax incentives within the city's downtown and harbor area. In 2010, MHBC was retained to undertake two major amendments to the city's CIP, which included expanding the area in which the CIP applies to be citywide, and the addition of new programs. The 2010 CIP added the Affordable Housing Loan Program, the Environmental Study Grant, and the Development Charges Refund Program as incentives under the CIP, and the Brownfields and Vacant Lands Tax Assistance Programs were retained. The 2010 CIP remained in force and effect for 5 years. Then in 2015, Council resolved to extend the expiration date of the CIP to August 2020. In June of this year, Council extended the expiration date of the 2010 CIP a second time to allow planning staff appropriate time to update the CIP, and the 2010 CIP is set to expire on December 31st of this year. So the purpose of the new CIP, as I've noted, the city's current CIP has been in place for the past 10 years and will be expiring by end of year, which warrants the update. Another reason for the update is the release of the county's first CIP program in June of 2019, following the adoption of their new official plan, Recolor Gray. The county program will provide $20,000 per year in capital grant funding to CIP programs over the next 5 years, in addition to other incentives such as tax assistance and surplus lands. So in order for the city to take advantage of these incentives, we must bring our current CIP into conformity with the county's template. So the draft, to date, a draft community improvement plan has been completed. As noted by the clerk, notice of the public meeting was provided in the Sun-Times newspaper, and the draft document was provided on the city's website on September 4th. The draft document has also been circulated to the prescribed persons and bodies under the Planning Act. The following slides will provide an overview of the changes to the CIP that are reflected in the draft document, which include the addition of new incentive programs, new sections of the CIP, as well as general updates. So to begin with the CIP incentive programs, there are 12 incentive programs proposed as part of the new community improvement plan. 4 of the programs are existing under the 2010 CIP and proposed to be retained. 6 are new programs, and 2 are proposed to be modified. Certain incentives will continue to apply only to the city's downtown and harbor area. So existing incentives, the first is the Facade and Structural Improvement Grant Program, which applies only to the downtown and harbor area. The city has seen frequent subscription to this program and has averaged approximately 9 applicants per year from 2017 to 2019. In 2020, so far, we've received 6 applicants. The city has paid out approximately $20,000 in grant funding this year, with $30,000 in works being approved in 2019 and 2020, but not yet completed. The city budgeted $20,000 to the Facade Grant Program in 2020, and upon completion of the CIP conformity exercise, the city would be able to use the $20,000 in county capital funding towards this program if council so chooses. The Vacant Lands Tax Assistance Program has provided tax assistance in the amount of $1.3 million to property owners of vacant lands within the downtown and harbor area. Lutheran Social Services Life Lease Community on First Avenue West is one example of a property which has benefited from this program. The city does not allocate a specific budget to the program. Rather, the grant amount is based on the increase in municipal tax assessment that results from redevelopment. The increase in taxation is phased over a 10-year period. So for example, the property owner would pay 0% of the increase in year 1, 10% in year 2, and so on. The Vacant Lands Tax Assistance Program is reflected in the county's CIP. So upon completion of this update, the county will be able to participate in this program by phasing in the increase in the county portion of tax assessment. So the Brownfield Financial Tax Incentive Program, the city has provided around $500,000 in tax assistance under this program. The Professional Center on 3rd Avenue West is one example of a property that has benefited from this program. And it assists in offsetting the cost to remediate brownfield sites and increases the viability of their redevelopment. The amount of tax assistance provided to any one property cannot exceed the total costs of remediation. The province already assists in this program by providing assistance on the education portion of taxes, and the county will begin to assist following the update of the CIP. Finally, the Heritage Property Tax Rebate Program provides a rebate of 20% of the city and educational portion of property taxes to eligible owners of designated heritage properties. There are approximately 16 designated properties within the city that meet all eligibility criteria, and approximately 12 to 13 applicants apply each year. $15,000 is budgeted to the program, and often rebates are under budget. Once the CIP is brought into conformity with the county will begin to provide a rebate of 20% of the county portion of taxes. So new incentive programs. There are 6 proposed under the new CIP. Each of these programs are reflected in the county's program and have been selected based on research and consultation with other municipalities where these programs are seen to work well. It is intended that these may be further refined based on public consultation and engagement with stakeholders such as the county. So the first program, I will go through each of the new programs. The first is the Tax Increment Equivalent Grant, or the TEAG, which is intended to function similar to the Vacant Lands Tax Assistance Program. It provides a deferment of the increase in municipal taxes resulting from the redevelopment or rehabilitation of a commercial industrial property over 10 years. An example of industrial property, Belwick Packaging on 8th Street East recently undertook an addition to their operation that resulted in an increase in their assessment. And so that is an example of a industrial use that would be eligible. Next, the Surplus Lands and Buildings Grant is an asset grant that gives council the ability to offer surplus lands and buildings at a reduced cost or possibly at no cost. This grant program is not intended to prevent the city from the sale and disposition of land in accordance with other city bylaws, but it is intended to provide flexibility to offer city-owned assets where council would like to see buildings or lands for a specific use, such as affordable housing. And by including this program within the CIP, the county is also able to participate by offering surplus county-owned lands. Next, the Property and Landscaping Improvement Grant is intended to encourage property owners to improve the attractiveness and functionality of their properties. Examples of eligible projects that could receive funding under this program include the addition of landscaping features, exterior lighting, walkways, and parking area upgrades. And this program is proposed to apply on a citywide basis. Next, the Accessibility Improvement Grant is intended to encourage improvements to properties that exceed the requirements of the Ontario Building Code and the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. Types of eligible projects include the installation of ramps, widening of entryways, or leveling and repairs to pathways. It's also proposed that the city would fund interior accessibility improvements, such as the installation of elevators or lifts, which would be particularly beneficial to business owners within the downtown. The accessibility grant is also proposed to apply on a citywide basis. Next, the Startup Space Leasehold Improvement Grant is proposed to apply only within the downtown and harbor area, and it's intended to encourage businesses to set up shop by providing grants for permanent leasehold improvements within commercial or mixed-use buildings. Types of eligible projects include plumbing and heating upgrades or renovations, the installation of partitions or rooms, interior signage, or lighting. And finally, the Vacant Buildings Conversion and Expansion Grant also is proposed to apply only within the downtown and harbor area and is intended to assist in the small-scale conversion of existing vacant space into new commercial, residential, or mixed uses. So an example would include the conversion of an existing vacant floor space into a rental dwelling unit. So there are a couple modified incentive programs under the new CIP. The first is the Environmental Study Grant, which provides a grant to cover the costs associated with undertaking environmental studies required by the Ministry of Environment. The maximum amount of the grant is $10,000, and any one property could receive up to 2 grants. This is proposed to be retained but expanded under a study and design grant to include other types of studies eligible for grant funding, such as urban design studies or heritage impact assessments. The study and design grant would have the same funding structure as the environmental study grant. Secondly, the development charges grant under the 2010 CIP provides a grant less than or equal to the amount of DCs owed for residential redevelopments or conversions in the downtown and harbor area. To date, this program has not been implemented or funded. As noted, it was proposed to be modified to provide grants equal to or less than the amount of DCs owed for rental housing developments on a citywide basis. So based on further consultation with corporate services staff and the county, it is proposed that the city retain the DC exemption for rental housing development within the development charges bylaw. And this would be consistent with the county's approach. But staff are continuing to recommend that the DC grant program under the 2010 CIP be modified to the DC rebate program. But the program would not be activated under the CIP. It would sit there and remain as a tool for council's future use should they decide to utilize it. And in doing so, an amendment to the CIP would not be required. So finally, this slide just summarizes the new CIP incentive programs, which apply on a citywide basis versus only to the downtown and harbor area. And moving on to the three new sections that are proposed under the new CIP. The first, section 6, deals with implementation. And the purpose of this section is mainly to provide general eligibility criteria for all financial incentive programs that was not previously included under the 2010 CIP. So examples of general eligibility criteria include that a property owner must not be in tax arrears and that projects must commence under a building permit. Section 6 also speaks to budgeting of incentive programs, which would be established by council on an annual basis, and would the budgeting of CIP programs would not constitute an amendment to the CIP. Section 7 deals with administration of the CIP and provides that the Community Services Department will be responsible for administering the plan, as is the current process. Council, in consultation with Community Services Committee, is the authority responsible for making decisions on applications made under the CIP. This section also provides general submission requirements and the application process that will apply where specific program implementation guidelines may not be developed. And finally, Section 8 of the CIP provides how the plan will be monitored and evaluated. Data on each CIP incentive program, such as the utilization of budget and number of applicants to each program, will be collected on an ongoing basis, and community services staff will report to Community Services Committee and Council on the CIP on an annual basis. So the new CIP also includes several general updates, including new mapping, a glossary to improve interpretation and readability of the CIP, and new sections and wording under Section 2, basis of the CIP to reflect updated legislation and policies, such as the 2020 PPS and the new county official plan. So next steps, planning staff consulted with Community Services Committee on September 16th, the Economic Development Committee on September 18th, and the Accessibility Advisory Committee on September 28th on the update of the CIP. The public meeting represents a key step in the update process. Planning staff will also be consulting with the DIA in October. It is anticipated that a recommendation report will be brought forward to Council in November, recommending adoption of the new CIP, and a new CIP will be in force and effect by December 22nd of this year. Following adoption, staff will present recommendations to Council on the funding of the new CIP programs, and will work on creating detailed program implementation guidelines and application forms for the implementation of new programs. And so that's all for this presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions of Council.
Council questions. Councillor Gregg.
Very well presented, Jackie. Thank you very much. One item I thought in the past, and I kind of mentioned it early on in our official plan, our first meeting where we were discussing the official plan. It just kind of occurred to me tonight. I would be a big proponent of being able to bury parking in so many instances. So if somebody constructs a 3 or a 4-story apartment building, is there an inducement that we can maybe have to try to motivate them to have underground parking instead of taking the easy way out, which is what so many do, and it's not as well aligned with looking after the environment. So in looking at the presentation here tonight, I'm starting to wonder if that type of an idea is more relevant to what we're looking at here, or would there be a different arm of our planning where such an idea would be discussed? Sorry to throw that one at you right now, but you did such a good job going through it. Then I was just being, the idea was going, is this the right area to discuss that idea?
I think planning staff can explore potentially implementing that as part, potentially under the property and landscaping improvement grant. So within one of these existing programs, I think I will note that following the update of the official plan, I believe, and maybe my director can also speak to this, an update to the city's zoning bylaw, and perhaps if the city wishes to see more underground parking, that's something that should be implemented through zoning.
I appreciate that. That's a great response. I know it's big dollars. Obviously, it's not something small, and a lot of the subject matter here is very in smaller increments. But then I'm thinking, if it's a $60,000 increase to assessment, but we can have some sort of a scenario where we bonus 20,000 to incentivize, perhaps it is relevant here. So thank you.
Ms. Coulter, anything you need to add to that? No. Good. Councillor Tamming, you had your hand up.
Jackie, thanks for your work. Your department continues to just impress, and I just thank you for that. But I do have some questions. First of all, for clarity for the public, we hear a lot of complaints about our vacancy rebate. I think you know what I'm talking about, and how that may incentivize commercial places to remain vacant. I'm not saying that they do. I'm just saying that's a complaint. In a way, are we working at cross purposes by having, and feel free if you prefer Ms. Coulter to speak to this, but are we working at cross purposes to have that rebate on the one hand, and then I don't remember the exact name of the program, but you have something else that gives money to people, I think $15 a square foot to help increase their commercial. Is there a bit of tension between, can you speak to that from a policy point of view? And then I have one other question as well.
Yes, so the vacancy tax rebate that the city currently has is not a program that's implemented or administered under the city's CIP. I understand that program is going to be revisited following the construction of the 10th Street Bridge. So certainly I think this update coincides with that program, and council can consider at that time whether to continue on with that.
I just wanted to highlight that because to me it seems bad policy to incentivize things on one hand and perhaps incentivize the very opposite on the other. My second question is this. Just as an observer, I've only been on council a couple of years, but before I was in council, I thought what's really working downtown, because most of what you speak to is about improving the dowdier sections of downtown. I love the facade improvement program. It's modest. I think it's $7,500. But when I see things like Main Street, stick up their facade, and I just see it everywhere, I think it's terrific. Okay, so to me, that's a program that's working. Okay, I should have emailed you over the weekend. When I got the agenda. Can you point to some programs that you think are really lifting their weight, and other ones that maybe aren't being? There's not as much take up from the public. Is it? And again, if you prefer Ms. Coulter to speak to that, that's fine. But I'm curious what's working from your perspective and what the public seems reluctant to buy into for whatever reason.
Great discussion. My only concern here is that we're getting a long way from the public meeting for the community improvement plan. I get your point. This is something that would be great at a committee. I'm not sure we're putting staff in a spot where they came prepared to do a presentation. Now we're going.
I don't mind. Yeah, I take that, Your Worship. I don't mind it. I don't mind at all making that request to the community services, perhaps by way of a letter, because I'm not on that committee, but perhaps we could address it in that context.
Certainly, yes, planning staff will follow up with you with a letter. Thank you.
Okay, now other questions? That's good. Thank you very much for your presentation. I think it's back to you, Brianna. Comments from the public? Do we, I just want to double check under the circumstances about comments from the public.
Through your worship, I did not receive any written comments and no request to attend to make comments orally.
Okay, thank you. So with that, with no public comments having been made, I believe they can continue to be made if you contact City Hall and Jackie. And with that, I will declare this public meeting closed. Just before I head on to the next part of the agenda, I note that I forgot to mention that Jamie Eckensweiler, the assistant clerk, is working on screen from home instead of being in the room, but is actively participating. So we're down to number 9 in the agenda. We have no deputations or presentations. Public question period. Did we receive any questions?
Through your worship, I did not receive any questions.
Good, thank you. Number 11, correspondence received for which direction of council is required, and we received no correspondence. At number 12A, I think we have a report from Mr. Simmons with regard to city actions and decisions implemented in COVID from August 22nd to September 25th.
Through you, your mayor, to members of council, thank you for the opportunity again to present this monthly update on COVID. I'm not going to reiterate the entire report, but I did want to focus in on the items that we're asking recommendations for. One is the approving the waiving of fees associated with the provision of city picnic tables to various schools here in Owen Sound to assist with teaching and social distancing requirements. This past week, the principal of St. Mary's reached out to staff with that request. We have literally an abundance of picnic tables that could be used. We're asking to waive those fees. We, of course, would go into a memorandum of understanding with each and every school that requested that, although St. Mary's is the only school at this time that specifically asked. If other schools ask, this would cover that. And we would look to, for lack of a better term, protect our piece of capital, being the picnic table. So if it's damaged, though, that will be covered by the school. We would be looking for them to also pick up and deliver back to us when finished. But essentially, the kids don't have much of a place to go with lunchrooms, cafeterias closed, and also many of the teachers going to the administration in the school and saying, we'd love to host some classes outside. We just don't have the space or the opportunity to do it. So I think if we as a municipality can lend ourselves and lend those picnic tables, it's going to help with the COVID social distancing and the other things that Grey Bruce Health Unit is asking all students to do and setting a great example. The province has exempted the municipality this year. I know we do like to participate in the emergency training exercises. However, with an amendment to the current Ontario regulations through the COVID and the pandemic, the province has waived that requirement. So that's good to note for everybody involved with those. The Bayshore Field Hospital, it is still fully set up within the Bayshore. And we have a meeting coming up in the next few weeks to discuss that with the hospital, Grey Bruce Health Unit, and the attack. The situation of COVID around the province, as we all know from news reports, is changing literally by the day. So we are watching that very closely. I want to commend staff and our coordinator of health and safety here, Misha Soon, for her work in watching that. And Kate, under your leadership, putting together with HR various policies and procedures for staff dealing with COVID testing, et cetera. So that is well in hand and being monitored very closely. Now, the other item in our recommendations, council approved a rent relief program back in March of this year. It was extended once to June. It was extended again through September. Staff are seeking to have that extension through the remainder of this year. As the patio season comes to an end, the limited revenue opportunity that these tenants did have for a short time frame has been helpful, but it's not anywhere near what it has been in the past. So we are requesting that through December 31st, that the rent relief program be initiated. I believe our Director of Corporate Services will speak to it, but we have assessed what those fees will be and already accommodated that within our projections. So it wouldn't be additional dollars impacting the COVID numbers. Our facility bookings on a high note and campground revenue are all very strong this year. Again, it led to, once things opened up, there was a strong demand to get back on the ice, get back into campgrounds, et cetera. So you can see the campground at Harrison Park, although operating only at 70% capacity, is well above projections. We projected revenue in the realm of about $90,000, but currently right now bookings through Thanksgiving are generating $120,000 of revenue. So strong revenue. And again, kudos to the staff working in community services and helping to get the park campgrounds and parks opened and usable, and the facilities open and usable. We had a great uptick on music at the market. I see that everybody's been handed a mask with music at the market. I know we've received emails. I don't know about council, but staff have received emails and people just stopping staff saying what a great initiative that has been. I think it's been incredibly well received and something we'll want to duplicate even past COVID and using that market space appropriately. Transit is now has launched the Guelph and Sound Transit August 31st, and through September 20th, there have been 98 riders to date. So that's an important initiative coming out of the county and the entire area, helping people move from one place to the other. There are stops, as you know, at Chatsworth, Williamsford, Durham, Mount Forest, Arthur, Fergus, Elora, and Guelph. And I'd like to promote use of that for people who may be watching or listening to this council meeting. And I believe with that, I will close my presentation. There's no financial implications as part of this report. I'd ask people to turn to report CR 20069 again, which our Director of Corporate Services will be speaking to in just a moment. But as far as COVID goes, the city itself is in, I believe, relatively good condition. Thank you to the province and the federal government again for assisting with dollars. And with that, I'm open for any questions.
Great, thank you. Questions? There we go. Councillor Hamley, go ahead.
Yeah, to the city manager. I had just received quite a few comments about the music at the markets. There were some questions as regard to who's paying for the music at the markets, and I was just wondering, as a point of for the public's benefit, if you could maybe just clarify that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hamley, I will ask our Director of Community Services, Ms. Pam Coulter, to address that question.
Sure.
Go ahead, Pam.
As council may recall, we had applied for a TIO grant, and the music at the market is being paid for entirely by the TIO grant.
As I've gone past, I've noticed 50 to 100 people there at noon hour to see some of these concerts, and probably up from that. We do have another question. Councillor Gregg, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd be ready to move the recommendation in the report. I just want to add to it's. I think it behooves us to continue the rent relief program. This is a program actually nationally that there's been a lot of disappointment that a lot of landlords have not went through the intake process to support the tenants that they have. So that's a part of this program or this report that I'm gladly in support of in helping our tenants get through what a very difficult time. So I'll move the report and the recommendation.
Great, thank you. Any other comments? I am seeing none. I'll call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. So we're down to 12B, which is a report from Ms. Allen with regard to the financial update from COVID-19. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. This will be my last council or my last COVID financial update that I bring forward to council. Future reports will come through our Corporate Services Committee as we get through Q3 and into year end. Not a lot has changed since the last report, and our estimated deficit remains manageable at $40,000. Council will recall that the city has received $800,000 to date in Safe Restart funding from the province. These funds offset a COVID-related deficit of approximately $1.1 million. Other cost control and mitigating efforts have saved approximately $500,000, most notably from staff-related savings, including layoffs and the delayed hiring of seasonal staff. The report also highlights some non-COVID related variances in both positive and negative directions. These include a surplus created from pausing our climate change initiatives, and this will be discussed again at our 2021 budget. Costs associated with labor negotiations, estimated deficits from waste management due to external markets, the favorable impact of a mild winter, and most notably, when I look today at our building permit revenues, they are in excess of $600,000. This is $420,000 higher than the same time last year, and it demonstrates not only the fruits of labor of our development team, but also signals imminent growth, which will share the tax burden and ultimately benefit all existing taxpayers and residents. Included in the report is a summary of the 2020 capital program, listed as $815,000 in capital projects deferred as a result of COVID. Many of these projects are carried forward to 2021, while some have been reprioritized to make resources available for higher priority projects next year. How deferred capital is treated going forward will be highlighted for Council at our capital budget meeting scheduled for November 13th. So the moral is, barring any unforeseen impacts, we are in good shape this year as far as our financial position goes and the impact of COVID.
Great, thank you. I want to move that. Councillor Thomas?
Well, I'd just like to say spectacular. That is excellent news. Certainly in terms of the building permits, I think we've all been anxiously waiting for something really good to happen like that. So that is excellent. And I'm happy to move the motion, Your Worship.
Great, thank you. Any other comments? So I'll call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Thanks, Kate. At 12C, I think probably from Mr. Kafalis with regard to purchasing sidewalk 8th Avenue West.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through Your Worship, I'm happy to say we finally received bids on a project we've been trying to complete for 2 years, and bids that are well within our proposed budget. Staff is asking Council to award the concrete sidewalk on 8th Avenue West to LSP General Concrete in the amount of $72,020 plus HST. The city will be cost sharing this project with the municipality of Georgian Bluffs, who will be contributing $30,000. The city's portion will be approximately $43,287.55 after HST rebate, and this amount will be funded through the gas tax reserve.
Good, thank you. Councillor Dodd?
Thank you, Your Worship. It's great news to finally hear that we're going to get some progress on that street. I know some people in that neighborhood would be happy to hear. So, and so will those students. But I'll move that recommendation.
Great, thank you. Any other comments? None. I'll call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. 12D, probably you again, Mr. Kafalis. 10th Street Bridge, something dedication. 10th Street Bridge.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through Your Worship. As with all our bridges, there needs to be a dedication for the 10th Street Bridge. Staff has sat down and met with Grey Roots to discuss possible names that could be considered for the dedication. We considered Emancipation Bridge because the city's long-running Emancipation Festival and the picnic that celebrates emancipation, and the fact that Owen Sound was the most northerly terminus of the Underground Railroad. Given the current movement of Black Lives Matter, it was deemed an appropriate name to be considered. We also considered Centennial Bridge, which was an obvious choice for consideration because 2020 is the city's 100-year anniversary of becoming a city. Before May 12, 1920, we were considered a town. Given that we were unable to hold any significant festivities due to COVID-19, we deemed Centennial Bridge as an appropriate name for consideration. We also looked at Reconciliation Bridge, which was considered in an effort to continue to recognize the negative impacts residential schools have had on the Indigenous people across our nation. One such name that was brought up by the people of Grey Roots was Division Street Bridge, which was considered because 10th Street was originally called Division Street. That name was changed in 1909 when Mayor Harrison changed all the street names to numbers because of his experience in New York. That leads us to what we're just calling the preferred option or dedication name, and that is Gitche Name Wikwadon, in recognition of the Anishinaabe Three Fire Confederacy. Gitche Name Wikwadon means Great Sturgeon Bay, and Anishinaabe, sorry if I'm mispronouncing some of these names, and was the name of Owen Sound before the contact of European settlers. By dedicating the bridge in the ancestral name and language of the Three Fire Confederacy, the city wouldn't only be making a significant gesture towards reconciliation, but it would also recognize the original historical name of Owen Sound. Staff is asking City Council to move forward with the public consultation with the preferred dedication, and that notice be given of the preferred dedication, that Council would receive any public comments at the October 19th meeting of Council, and that following the October 19th meeting, Council would finalize their decision with respect to the dedication of the 10th Street Bridge.
Great, thank you. Councillor Martin?
I would like to move that recommendation with the preferred option as identified.
And I think we need to identify the preferred option, if I'm not mistaken.
So my understanding from the reading of the report and was that it was Gitche Nimikwidam. Have I understood that correctly?
Through your worship, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor O'Leary?
Your worship, as the motion stands, I won't vote for it. I think this is a really big decision. I think we should take our time with it. I really think it should go to committee and go through the process. Preferably, I'd like to see it almost like we do the Senior of the Year or Volunteer of the Year. We have a point system. If we have 2 or 3 names, then send it out to the public. Put your score in from 0 to 10. Bring it back to council with the numbers that the public came up with, and we can make our decision on that. We certainly don't have to be in a hurry. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Councillor Kepke?
Thank you, Worship. Through you to the director, I also agree with that. I don't feel that it's something that we as a council should name tonight. We need to take our time and hear from the public. I've already heard from some members of the public on some names that have been suggested, and I think those need to be shared with everyone.
I do note the recommendation is a preferred name and the council would receive public comments, so we would be going to the public with that. Councillor Thomas?
I would not support the motion as it stands either. I'd like to see a little more consult. I know staff has been working on this for a long time because I recall having an inquiry about Division Street some time ago. For council, when we got this report Thursday, this is the first time I've seen the selected names that we can choose from. And, you know, from a personal standpoint, I'd like a little more time. If I'm going to be the one choosing the name, I'd be a lot happier having the public choosing the name rather than the council, because it is a public bridge. Granted, we are the representatives of the public, but I would like to see more public input and recognizing, of course, that no matter what we name it, it's always going to be the 10th Street Bridge for everybody.
Other comments? Scott? I'm going to ask you to put up your hand like firmly.
Firmly. Okay.
Not kind of half up and half down and
Okay.
I miss it. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I will support the motion. It's worded that notice be given of a preferred dedication, and that's how I interpreted the report. They're all great ideas, particularly for me, Emancipation Bridge or the Gitche Nimikwidam. A bridge connects people, so I think here's an opportunity that we can move forward trying to connect people. We're connecting with our past and reconciliation in the spirit of it's trying to, in a small way, I think, right some of the wrongs that were done as we were settling the area here. So I'm in support of that name at this point and would welcome any public comments further, but I'll support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Dodd.
Thank you, Worship. I'm also looking at through the same vision that we will be receiving public comments no matter what we decide here today. My only question would be, no matter what we're going to do for public comments, can we put it as, instead of just opening up a platform to receive an email, can we just do a survey of something, like a Survey Monkey or something like that that's available on the website? So if someone does want to do it, they can click Centennial, they can click whatever they want, or I can say other. I don't want to make this more complicated than it is, but I do understand that there's going to be some sensitivity to whatever decision council makes. And I do believe that, as Councillor Thomas had stated, it is a public bridge, and I think we do need to take into consideration what the public wants from it. So I don't want to cause more work, but is that an option? Can we do that internally or something?
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Dodd. Absolutely, like technology gives us that option. But two things I'd put in front of council for your discussion this evening are, when we go to electronic survey, and staff would have to understand this, how important is it for council that this be a local decision rather than people from all over the world potentially piping in on a survey saying, here's what you should name your bridge. So there's just that aspect I'd like to put on the table for as you discuss. The second item I'd want to ask you to think about also in your discussion is, we essentially staff have noted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different name potentials for this bridge. Is the notion of council this evening to only move forward with these 5? Is it to open it up and let people come up with additional names, or is council satisfied that one of these 5 are appropriate, but you just want to hear more from the public on which of these 5 it should be? Because that makes a big difference in whether we're, as I think you probably are aware, in previous naming issues in the news with, what is it, Johnny Red Tug or something with the British Navy, etc. So it couldn't get carried away and silly, but I think from a staff perspective, we'd need to know if these are the 5 that we'll be looking for consultation on, or is it an open book? So I just asked that for information as you in your council discussion.
Councillor Dodd, anything to add to that?
Thank you, Worship. I would just refer to it that was called Bodie McBoatface, was the Australian Navy ship. So obviously we want that being Bridgie McBridgeface. But I do think that, yes, I agree with those 5, but there were some suggestions that we have heard that may not necessarily be those 5. Like I heard one, and I'm just saying this off the tip of my tongue, someone was saying, why aren't you naming the Peter Lemon Bridge? There are so many different aspects that are important to people in the public. And obviously, I do appreciate the 5 that you did recommend. I think those 5 are going to be something, but also Thursday to Monday is a tough one for someone to get behind, I guess.
My only comment would be on it. Sorry, I'll come back to you just in a second there, John. My only comment on a Survey Monkey is, you would have to be sure of the identity of the person that's submitting it, because I wouldn't want this to start to become anonymous submissions or made up names and going totally sideways. Councillor Tamming, go ahead.
I'll support the motion as well of Ms. Merton or Councillor Merton. I think it's a thing of beauty, and again, it's subject to public input. As for the city manager, I'm sure that Brent Fisher perhaps, or somebody with staff, knows how to consult with this town. I mean, I get what you're saying about Survey Monkey. The only comment I'd make, a member of the public told me, and I do not know my Ojibwe, but we should be careful. The word is called Gitche, Gitche, not Gitchie. So at the end of the day, Mr. Cathalis, if we can make sure that an Ojibwe specialist, if we go that route, reviews the wording. Thank you.
So any other discussion? Back to Councillor Merton to wrap up.
I would look to the city clerk to advise whether it is possible to add an amendment or to a modification to this. We've identified the preferred option, but I'm hearing from the other councillors that they would like the opportunity for public input to help guide the final decision. So I would look to the other council members to see whether there's an option or if the clerk will allow. I think Councillor Thomas calls it a friendly amendment. How friendly can we get here? So I would look to the wisdom of the other councillors.
Ms. Bloomfield or Mr. Simmons, I guess we'll go to Ms. Bloomfield first. Thank you.
Through you, your worship, you can add a friendly amendment if you could just outline what that would be that you're wanting to add to the motion.
So it's your motion. It's your motion. So if somebody's made a suggestion that you accept, then you can accept their friendly amendment, make that amendment, and change your motion. If not, you can proceed with your motion as is, and be subsequent motions perhaps. So it's up to you.
Through the mayor to Councilor Martin, I was just unclear, and I might ask the clerk for clarification. If Deputy Mayor O'Leary's, was that a motion to refer it to a committee, or?
I didn't make the motion because I just thought in past discussions or in past decisions of this magnitude that we would always go through a committee. And we've been working on this bridge for almost a year now. It's, you know, we don't have to be in a hurry to do this. I just want to make sure that we go through a long, hard look with the public and see what the public has to say before we make this decision. And in my opinion, I think that's through committee.
Go ahead, Councillor Hamley.
I'll maybe make it easy, and I'll just ask Councillor Martin for a friendly amendment that eliminates the first item, that notice be given of the preferred dedication. We just eliminate that.
So if I can friendly upon your friendly, I would like to acknowledge that council has been advised of the preferred dedication, and that as an additional step to this recommendation, that council requests that following the public meeting, the discussion occurs at a committee level, and based on committee recommendation, come back to council.
Maybe go to Councillor Kepke.
Just a further comment that I wanted to make earlier. Every member of the public may have their opinion. Every member of council may have their opinion on what this bridge should be named. Personally, I like Centennial Bridge because it recognizes our history, and it also recognizes that we're 100 years old. So, I mean, everyone's got their favorites, and we're going to have to sometime vote on that. But to me, it hasn't been flushed out enough. It just needs to be flushed out a bit more at committee or somewhere.
I'm going to go back to that motion. Ms. Bloomfield, you are...
I'm sorry, Your Worship. I'm unclear of what that motion is. Could I get that clarified?
So the amendment to the motion was that council acknowledges receipt of staff's recommendation regarding the preferred dedication.
But on that point, that would be staff's preferred. That we have not made up. We need the public consultation first, right?
Exactly.
So I don't think you can put that in writing on a motion.
Thought it was the intention that staff was not recommending a preferred, that we as council were going to recognize a preferred. At some point we need a motion. Probably the easiest motion right now is that I'm thinking this through, and the council is going to have to, and I'm really relying on Ms. Bloomfield. Probably the easiest motion is that Ms. Merton moves it as is, and that Councillor O'Leary moves to, before we vote on it, moves to table it to a committee meeting. Would that make sense, Brianna? To Operations Committee?
Sorry, through your worship, will it be are you looking to forward this report to committee? Defer it to committee rather than, because if you postpone it, that would mean this report itself would have to come back.
Trying to figure out how to do this without gerrymandering while we're on our feet. Councillor Thomas.
If I may, Your Worship, could I ask you please to call the question as it stands, and then let's get to a subsequent motion if there's going to be a subsequent motion?
Can I ask for clarity on the question then? I think the resolution needs to name what the bridge is going to be named, so it's clear that we know what we're voting on, what name we're voting on.
Go ahead,
Through your worship, can I read the motion that I have?
please.
That in consideration of staff report OP 20032 respecting the 10th Street Bridge dedication, City Council directs staff to move forward to the public consultation phase with the preferred dedication being Gitche-Nemaquidong Bridge, provide notice of the preferred dedication, receive any public comments until the October 19th meeting of council, and finalize council's decision respecting the 10th Street Bridge dedication following the October 19th regular council meeting.
Okay, so that's the motion that is on the floor. Councillor Thomas has asked for me to call the question and.
Request a ordered vote, please.
Okay.
Councillor Dodd?
In favor?
Councillor Gregg?
In favor?
Councillor Hamley?
Opposed.
Councillor Kepke?
Opposed?
Councillor Merton?
In favor?
Councillor Tamming?
In favor?
Councillor Thomas?
Opposed?
Deputy Mayor O'Leary?
Opposed?
Mayor Body?
In favor.
The resolution carries with 5 in favor and 4 opposed.
There we go. Next on our agenda is boards and committees housekeeping at 12E.
Through you, your worship, each year City Council selects the boards and committees they wish to serve on and considers the public appointments to boards and committees based on vacancies and terms of service that are expiring. This report is to start that process and obtain feedback from council. Committee terms begin in February, and in 2020, shortly after the new terms began, COVID-19 hit with full force and board and committee meetings were canceled. Boards and committees have recently started meeting again, but have had a reduced number of meetings. Staff are recommending extending the expiry date by 1 year for members of council who are appointed to boards and committees with terms expiring in 2021. Staff are also recommending that council forego the election of a chair and vice chair for committees and that the current chairs and vice chairs remain in place for 2021. The election of the chair process only applies to committees, which is outlined in our board and committee bylaw. Council previously decided that it is important that the council position on the police board be for 2 years. Since the appointment to the police board is for 2 years, staff are recommending that this position be filled through a nomination process. Should council approve this format, it would be done at the council meeting in December. Staff are recommending that public vacancies be filled in the same way that they've always been filled. The recommendation in the report is to bring forward a bylaw to extend the expiry dates by 1 year for members of council appointed to boards and committees with terms expiring in 2021, fill the vacancy on the police board through a nomination process, forego the established board and committee selection process in 2021, forego the election of chair and vice chair for committees in 2021, and carry out the established public appointment process to fill public vacancies on boards and committees.
Great, thank you. So basically it is approve the recommendations as set, or otherwise we would proceed the same way as the bylaw is set up and we've proceeded in past years, just so we're clear. Okay. Need to hear somebody. Councillor Dodd?
Thank you, Worship. I would move this recommendation as is. I will note that we had our first corporate services meeting last week. So I feel that if we do continue maintaining our current status on our current boards, we can move forward with that. If there is some scheduling conflicts, just like how they have done in the past, I'm sure we could have a little trade deadline like we did previously.
Good, thank you. Other discussion? Councillor Thomas?
I guess the other question would be whether council retains its present seating plan then, because that's all often chosen the same night as well. I just feel bad for Councillor Hamley because he's not on camera, and either Councillor Tamming or Councillor Dodd, they deserve a turn.
Ms. Bloomfield, you've been in the hot seat all night.
My plan was to bring forward a report to recommend that we continue to do our standard process, which is we would pick numbers and you would sit how the numbers are selected as per normal.
So that's on another night. Okay, so Councillor Dodd has moved the recommendation as is in front of us. Any further discussion? I'm seeing.
Just for the clerk, would this have any bearing on the, I know that there's a rule in the bylaw that you can only serve as chair for 2 consecutive years. Does this put that in play?
We would amend, or we would write our bylaw that comes forward to discount that for this year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, others? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? That is carried. On to the next one is 12F, which is the council and committee calendar report.
Through you, your worship, on an annual basis, council approves the council board and committee meeting calendar for the following year. The proposed calendar was put together in consultation with the senior leadership team. The number of council meetings is similar to previous years, with a small break being proposed in the summer, which is similar to most other municipalities in Grey County, including county council. Should additional meetings be required, this can be done at the call of the mayor or through a petition of council. Staff are recommending a reduced committee meeting schedule on a trial basis as outlined in the attached calendar. Again, should the need arise, additional meetings can be called by the chair or through a petition of the committee. As in previous years, should adjustments need to be made to the calendar would be updated on the website, circulated to applicable members and council, and placed on the information package of council. Staff are recommending that the Economic Development and Tourism Advisory Committee be folded into the Community Services Committee, which would have a standing agenda item titled Community Development and Tourism. The benefits of this include recognizing changes that have been made to the city's organizational structure, including its alliance and partnership with the county in the area of economic development and tourism, reducing duplication between boards and committees, and connecting the business community with bylaws and policies that directly affect them. Members of the business and tourism community will continue to be consulted with and be invited to Community Services Committee meetings where necessary. Should council wish to continue to have a separate committee to address the business and tourism matters, staff recommend that the committee meet on a quarterly basis. The recommendation in the report is to have council approve the calendar, direct that any housekeeping changes be done as outlined in the report, and direct staff to bring forward a bylaw to remove the Economic Development and Tourism Advisory Committee from the board and committee bylaw.
Great, thank you. Council, I note that there's been some discussion on this and there's some feelings around there. So instead of moving the motion first, having a discussion, I think we'll have the discussion first. It seems to me, if I read it right, there's approximately 3 questions in there. One would be around what we do with the number of council meetings. One would be around reducing committee meetings, and the third one I think would be around folding economic development, tourism into community services, which would be with the standing agenda. I'd like to maybe have a discussion around those. Maybe I can start with council meetings, reducing those. If there's a discussion around those, I'd like to hear it. Councillor Koepke.
Thank you, Worship. I I have points on all three of those, so hopefully you're going to let me speak more than once here.
Well, we'll probably
Taking-
go about them 3 different times, but
All right. So on the council meeting calendar, by my count, there's 19 meetings scheduled, which falls short of the normal 21 or 22 meetings annually, which is not an unreasonable expectation of a council member to attend. Given that some meetings can now take place by telephone or video conferencing or by the mayor's discretion to accommodate members who may be away from the city during a council meeting date, I do not agree with reducing this number. I feel it's a long time between meetings from July 26th to August 30th, and then again, council is not scheduled to meet until September 20th. I just feel this is a long time between authorization of business that may need approvals by council, let alone council keeping on top of emerging items and businesses.
thanks. Other comments? And I'm thinking strictly or aimed at this moment around the number of council meetings. Others? Other thoughts? Councillor Thomas?
I guess the only thing I could add is I always sort of felt that the midsummer council meeting was important because most of the committees take the summer off. And it was important for council to get together that extra time during the summer just to sort of keep a hand on what's going on. That's my only comment.
Thank you. Councillor Tamming?
I would support, I know it's not a motion, but Councillor Koepke comments fully. We're paid to be here. We're paid to decide things. And even if some meetings have lighter agendas than others, I think it's the least we can do is to keep the current schedule. I appreciate the staff's reason for perhaps wanting to reduce them. And I know it's made in good faith, but I do not think the current schedule is onerous.
We have any opinions in the opposite way that anyone wants to articulate? Okay, so I'm seeing none. The next one was discussion around committee meetings to, depending which ones bi-monthly or quarterly. Councillor Koepke.
Thank you, Worship. I do not agree with the reduced boards and committees calendar to quarterly meetings as noted on the calendar. Members of the public are an important part of municipal government process, and to diminish public members' opportunities to quarterly is, in my mind, not offering an open and transparent process to conducting business. A full schedule of meetings should take place, and rather than call special meetings as noted in the report, I would prefer to see a meeting be canceled if there's not sufficient business to deal with. For both council members and the public, it's important to maintain a regimented schedule and a calendar. And if a meeting is canceled, it's more appealing to deal with a free evening rather than making personal plans and having to cancel them for special meetings or risk being unable to attend a meeting and be counted as absent. At the municipal level of government, it is extremely important to include the public in the decision-making process, as their comments and opinions are representative of the public. It's important that this opportunity continue. Over the years, council and staff have looked at efficiencies and have continued to drastically reduce the committees and public participation.
Thank you. Other comments? Councillor Dodd?
Thank you, Worship. I guess this might merge into the economic development one as well, so I apologize if I get on a rant, you can stop me. But I do know that, in my opinion, we need to have a little bit more fulsome discussions at our committee meetings. I found that if we need to change the mandate of how those committees are actually being run, then I'd be in favor of changing mandates. But I just would like to talk about, sorry, I'm off now. Okay, let's go. Let's press the rewind button here. So right now we're having a challenge right now when we're not meeting a committee meeting or a committee agenda. This was our first time when we met just for corporate services. We talked about economic development. Their meetings are a little bit lighter than normal. Like, these are normally supposed to be advisory committees to council. The role of advisory committees are to give us advice, and we've seen the benefits of that. And when we talk about having some in-depth conversations, it's usually around complex issues. I can think back on community services regarding parks and recreation and ice time. those are the ones where you love to have someone on the public member sitting there to hear their perspective as well. Because I will be the first one to admit the 9 of us see enough things where sometimes we don't see that same vision that someone from the outside world sees it. So I would like to see, not less meetings. I'd prefer to see that we have more meetings with more fulsome discussions within those meetings to be able to kind of bring us back to that point that council has a direction from the public perspective. That's why we appoint those individuals, is to allow them to provide feedback to what we're doing, and whether that is having a corporate services committee taking a fulsome look at a budget before we get it, or looking at fees before we get it, or operations. I haven't sat in operations in a couple of years, so I don't know what they need to do, but there'll be something where you can have more public support and more public opinion on the way we handle our matters. I just think about when we're talking about, what's going to drive this community for the next 20 years. Economic development and tourism is still going to be there, and I think it still needs to be a focal point for our community and our city. I think about culture. A lot of people choose communities based off the culture it has. You look at Collingwood and all these other areas that have built their community based off culture, and some of these things get lost in the mix of a super committee. I think of a youth committee, youth advisory committee that's happening in London and happened in Hanover as well. How do we engage a segment of our population that we never hear from? Maybe those are the things that we need to start adding and including into our advancements of committee meetings, instead of, we get a lot of reports and we got a lot of things we kind of take a look at and we're kind of already approved from a report, or it's a video that we've already kind of done. I just think that there are some other opportunities that we should be taking advantage of. And if that means changing the mandates of what our committee structures actually are, then I'd be in favor of that, to ensure that we're getting some good opinions and advice from our committees.
Great, thank you. Councillor Tamming, I think you had your hand up.
I won't repeat. I support what Councillor Dodd said. Just for your information, if I could just advise staff, I did an informal poll of the TOM, and those that did respond on the committee, the TOM committee, seem to prefer bi-monthly to quarterly. So, and again, Aidan, our director, gave very able reasons why quarterly might be the way to go, but the feedback was there. Also, and Councillor Dodd can echo this, at corporate services, there were some very strong opinions from the public members about becoming quarterly. And those comments would more or less echo what Councillor Kepke said earlier. Members of the public are very important, and when they sign up, they just don't want to be seen as rubber stamping. They want to be seen as deeply involved. And there has to be a better way of getting the discussion at these committees going. And that's our responsibility. I'm sure Councillor Dodd would agree with that. So I'd rather see revitalized committees than see them truncated in any fashion.
Thank you. Councillor Gregg, I think you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor. I totally agree with the comments from Councillor Kepke and what I've heard so far. I've spoke to various individuals in the public committees too, and they are absolutely in line with the comments of Councillor Tamming. I think to next year, where we haven't just got through the strategic plan, the official plan, in the way that we were probably hoping 12 months ago for 2020. COVID has obviously thrown certain things into delay. I can see where we're undergoing these large plans next year. That's another mechanism for considerable public input. When it comes to, and particularly in the big three meetings, or the big three committees, at times I look at the material and corporate services a week ago, I thought there could have been a review of 2019 in terms of fire management. There could have been a review of bylaw. There could have been the first 6 months of the year come forward in bylaw. There could have been fire reports came forward. I think back to a fellow that asked me a good question when we bought the fire truck, and why did you do 75 or 100? And I didn't have an answer because it just didn't go through committee. And I'd like to be able to provide people an answer where it's been fleshed out. I think in operations, where we do a 5-year water and wastewater rate study, and we have these capital projects come forward, and that's kind of the last we ever hear of them until the next water and wastewater study. And to me, I think every year that's the type of a report that you bring forward to committee members, to public members for input, and it's a progress report. essentially to measure how you're proceeding against the policies and regulations that you've implemented. So I think there's, yeah, and I think in community services too, I've heard when I was on it in years past, excellent comments from some people on Facade improvement program. And they see the finished work, and somebody asked a legitimate question about, should that qualify? Should we look at maybe some changes to the parameters of what does qualify? Just in the last 3 or 4 meetings now, we've had 2 or 3 facade improvements come forward to council, which I presume we're trying to get, rush them through. But again, now we're not able to go through the proper process. We take away a council meeting in the summer, and you've lost even that ability to get some material quickly in front of council that needs to be dealt with, whether it's a heavy agenda or a light agenda. At times it just needs to be spoken to and approved. So I'm in full agreement with the schedules in the past, and the economic development is a little bit more of a further discussion yet.
Deputy Mayor, nothing? No? Okay, I'm going to go to the far end and work my way back. Councillor Hamley.
The 2 years that I've been on council, the one big thing that has really stuck out to me is just, and it's not a staff issue, it's not a council issue, it's not even the members who are the public members who are on the committees. The committees to me just don't seem to work the way that they are right now. I think the way that they operate need to be completely changed, as Councillor Dodd has kind of alluded to. My first year, I sat next to one of the public members, and she sat there for 6 months, and then she just resigned because it wasn't an effective use of her time. So we need to I think it's very important that we make these committees more valuable.
Great, thank you. Councillor Merton, anything to add?
I agree with the comments that have been discussed at this council. Our responsibility is governance. And that's a role that we've been assigned. To be able to govern, we need to represent, and we need to hear from the representation. I agree that looking at how committees function and how can we make them more vital and viable would be a healthy way to move forward, including defining the role of the chair and who decides what goes on the agenda and what topics need to be addressed. I would certainly encourage that, and I certainly support the comments.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas, I'm working my way this way.
Well, I agree with pretty much all the comments I've heard here tonight. I will always resist any move that I perceive to be a weakening of the public input that we receive as a council. I do see some of these recommendations in that way. I think that the committee structure is important. Can it be reimagined? Absolutely, 100% it can be reimagined, and I can think of a couple of committees that need it pretty badly, and we're going to talk about one of them in a second. So that's all I'll say on that, Your Worship, because otherwise it'll just be a rehash.
Okay, so last question I think was specifically to economic development and tourism, and folding it into community services with a standing agenda. Comments, Councillor Thomas.
Thanks, Your Worship. I had to think about this one because I have been involved with economic development and tourism for most of the time that I've been on council. I chaired it for a number of years. In some ways, it's always been a committee searching for a purpose, especially after we moved our director up to Grey County and, ceded some of our economic development activities to the county. However, when we did that, certainly my understanding here as a councillor was that we would continue to run our economic development committee, and in fact, the economic development function would be handled by the city manager's office. And I'd like to see that continue that way. Could the committee reimagine itself? Absolutely. I think Grey County is doing a great job on economic development, but its focus is the entire county, and our focus needs to be on Owen Sound, no matter what's going on up there at the county. It was interesting. I went onto the county's economic development website today, and Hanover, Grey Highlands, Meaford, and the town of the Blue Mountains all still have economic development staff working on their behalf. To me, that says, and virtually all the other municipalities do have contact information on there for economic development inquiries. I think this is one of the key committees that if we need to reimagine it, we need to reimagine it. But economic development is the only thing, as far as I'm concerned, for this community, and we need to continue on with it. I think that, as we're looking at a refresh, if we are looking to align with the county, I just want to point out that the county's committee is economic development, tourism, and culture, which are three disciplines, or however you want to refer to them, that tie in so tightly together, especially for a city like Owen Sound, which was named a cultural capital of Canada. I think that it's time to bring back our culture committee, which was rolled into community services, and added in with economic development and tourism, and reimagine the role that committee has in our community.
Thank you. Other comments, other thoughts? Deputy Mayor O'Leary?
I just wanted to make the point, we had our first economic development meeting a week ago Friday, and I just found it interesting from a staff perspective, looking at the combining with the community services. At that meeting, at the economic development meeting, Pam was here, Amy, Jackie did a presentation, Brent Fisher did a presentation, Melissa was here, the entire planning staff was here. So if you're gonna, if the thought was to combine the two and put economic development into community services, I would probably agree with that, as long as we didn't lose the heading of economic development. So if you go to a community services meeting, you do community services, you get down to the agenda, economic development. You've got all the staff here that you would for the other committee, and you get it all done in one night, sort of thing. So I just throwing that out there.
Thanks. Others? Councillor Kepke?
Thank you, Worship. I certainly agree with Councillor Thomas on his comments regarding economic development. And I think it's very important that Owen Sound is still recognized as the hub of Grey County. And I think we still need to keep our economic development focus in Owen Sound. Thanks.
Okay. Others? Noted that, well, there's some different points of view around. Councillor Tamming mentioned the art gallery that wanted to, it wasn't talking about staying yearly, but we're quite happy to go bi-monthly and maybe use some subcommittee time in there, and there might be some different options. So I wonder if it would make sense for Tim to maybe meet with some of the chairs of the committees and see what those committees want to do. Over the 12 years since I started on operations, before I went on council, operations has always been a heavy hitter. Community services have always been a heavy hitter. With budgeting and those types of things, I thought corporate services didn't have as many reports and has never had as many reports, because it's kind of ongoing and the budget set and it goes on. So it might be different than the others. And I'm wondering if maybe we should, actually I think Councillor Thomas has got a motion that would make sense if he can read it, and then everyone can decide. Go ahead.
Thanks, Your Worship. I do have a motion that in consideration of staff report CR 20067 respecting the 2021 Council Board and Committee meeting calendar, City Council 1 receives the report for information. 2, requests that the City Manager meet with the chairs of all standing committees and advisory committees to discuss meeting protocols and frequency. And 3, direct staff to bring forward a revised 2021 Council Board and Committee meeting calendar report to the October 19th, 2020 Council meeting, based on comments provided by the Standing Committee and Advisory Committee chairs during the meetings with the City Manager. And I'm flexible on the October 19th. That may be a bit too short in terms of time, and I'm happy to take advice on that one.
Mr. Simmons, go ahead.
Yeah, through you, Mayor, to Councillor Thomas. I appreciate the flexibility and the timing. I would try, knowing this is an important issue, to staff also, if I might just add, it is an incredibly important issue. Our goal as staff is to bring excellence in governance for council and for us. And we have identified also the notion that we're working on, and staff, the senior leadership team here have been working not at committee, but in our own meetings on a more comprehensive agenda review process that includes all of the committees. So in discussing this with senior leadership, it quickly found out that the rigor, in my opinion, was not there as the new city manager. And to correct that, no matter the committee structure, we are making it a priority then on a go forward to meet. Each lead for each committee would meet with the committee chair prior to the meeting and do a full agenda review. And I do respect Councillor Dodd and Councillor Hamley's comments. I think there's a lot of opportunity to look at the committees themselves and understand the mandates and understand what the goal or the finish line is, so to speak, for each committee and where it's going. So we all have a clear expectation and a clear understanding of why that committee exists. So in the report suggesting going to bi-monthly, as senior leadership, we also spoke about the monthly meetings and not eliminating public participation, thus really not changing the composition of any committee, but rather looking at the time that staff need to prepare for each of those committee meetings. And again, back to the notion of excellence and governance and bringing that forward. So I'd be pleased to follow through with that motion, Councillor Thomas, to meet with each of the chairs of those standing committees and advisory committees. And I might also add, Mr. Mayor, I think based off of that and more information in October, to set up a special council education session on committee structure and the role and work of committees in general, so we can maximize the governance structure we're working in. So everybody, not only council, staff, but the public, feel as though the governance structure that is in place here brings forward that excellence notion.
I suppose what you didn't say is we're talking about quality versus quantity too. When we're talking about meetings, it's kind of hitting that corner that we haven't talked about. But okay, Councillor Thomas has a motion on the floor. Any further discussion to that motion? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Thanks to staff, to Jamie, that put a lot of work into that report, and frankly, forcing the discussion that we've needed to have for a while. Next at 12G, I've got a model home agreement with regard to Braymont. Mr. Kafalis.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through Your Worship. This staff report deals with the formalizing a model home agreement with Braymont Owen Sound Corporation. Braymont has a parcel of land in Sydenham Heights and wishes to build 2 model homes within their subdivision to promote their development. The agreement ensures that the cost of providing the needed services is borne by the developer. In order to proceed, the wastewater trunk sewer that was installed originally to service the subdivision must be extended by 35 meters to what will become the 4-way intersection that services both the Braymont lands north of 8th Street and the Red Hawk property is located south of 8th Street. As such, staff is requesting City Council to pass a bylaw to authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute a model home agreement with Braymont Owen Sound Corporation, attached as Schedule A hereto, to provide roadway, municipal service extension, and connections to the development located within the Braymont lands on 8th Street East, to approve the city's share of funding of the extended sanitary sewer, estimated $85,765 for the 8th Street wastewater sewer extension detailed in model home agreement, to be provided from the previously approved general wastewater budget from surpluses elsewhere in the budget, and authorize that this amount be recovered through amending the Sydenham Heights area specific development charges bylaw.
Great, thank you. Councillor Hamley had his hand up.
Yeah, I'm super happy to see this. I actually have a question. Does anybody know when the last time there was a model home in Owen Sound?
That is not a question I can answer.
I believe there was down at the, right along the shore, those 4 little homes, they were model homes, were they not, Ms. Calder? Thank you.
Okay, so it wasn't all that long ago, but Darn, that didn't work so well. But moral of the story is I'm super happy to see this. I think we're all pretty happy to see this, and I will move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Great, thank you. I think that'd have to be 30 years ago. But, okay, any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. 12H, Manager Planning and Heritage with regard to Planning Act application for Block 3.
Thank you, Worship. The Anpet subdivision is located on the west side of 16th Avenue. Servicing of the subdivision is underway currently. A building permit was recently issued for Block 7 for a retirement home. Prior to the subdivision approval by council, there was an official plan amendment as well as a zoning amendment in 2019. Section 45 of the Planning Act does not permit a minor variance within 2 years of that zoning bylaw amendment unless council approves the making of that application. ANPET has now completed their detailed design for Block 3. The clerk has the plan on the screen before you. It's a block that will contain a number of townhouses. ANPET is now requesting that council permit the application to be made. Granting the permission to make the application is not an endorsement by council of the application, and staff are recommending that council grant the request.
Great, thank you. Councillor Dodd?
Thank you, Worship. I'd move the recommendation.
Okay. Other comments? Seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried. Another good news story. 1393 16th Avenue East. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Worship. Jacqueline, who prepared the report, is still here, so I'm a bit nervous presenting on her behalf. I'd like to acknowledge the work of Jacqueline and the other planning staff and the development team in this development. So this is a site plan application for a property located on the east side of 16th Avenue East between 10th Street and 16th Avenue. The application was made in July. There was a number of materials submitted with the application, including engineered site plans, landscape, and site plans, all part of a complete application. The site was also subject to a minor variance with respect to front yard and north interior side yard setback, a reduction of 1 parking space, and a reduction of the landscape buffer. In terms of the provincial policy statement, this infill development in an urban settlement area on full municipal services on a transit route represents the efficient, cost-effective, transit-supportive development that's consistent with the provincial policy statement. The site is designated arterial commercial in the city's official plan and contemplates clinics and professional offices. The official plan provides policies that support orienting buildings to the street with parking in the rear yard, and this development embraces that concept and is an attractive, well-scaled development for this small lot. The property is zoned C4. Veterinary clinic is a permitted use, subject to the minor variance coming into effect, and that will happen October 7th. The proposed site plan does meet all site and building requirements of the zoning bylaw. I would note that one additional barrier-free space is provided by the site plan. The proposal was presented today to the city's Accessibility Advisory Committee, who supported a recommendation endorsing the site plan. Overall, there's a strong street frontage. It is a small frontage, and they've maximized pedestrian connectivity with a sidewalk from 16th Avenue East with tactile plates. The landscaping will have a positive impact. The stormwater management is acceptable in terms of quality and quantity, subject to the relocation of an oil and grit interceptor off the sidewalk. There is a capital improvement charge applicable to this property for work the city front-ended some time ago on 16th Avenue in the amount of $32,000. Your Worship, we're recommending approval of the site plan subject to the conditions outlined in Schedule E, and we would ask that you would authorize a bylaw to allow the execution of site plan and servicing agreements.
Great, thank you. Deputy Mayor O'Leary.
Thank you, Worship. Just a comment. I go up and down Main Street quite a bit, and I just wanted to say that with the patios, a couple of renovations going on, the facade program, music at the market, I think our downtown's rebounded quite well during the pandemic, and I think things are looking pretty positive. So I'm happy to move the recommendation.
You moving the facade grant? Okay, can you hold on for just one report? That's okay. It does relate. Don't worry, it does relate. Go ahead, Councillor Kepke.
That's okay. Thanks, Your Worship. I was going to move the facade grant, but that's okay. You can do that one. I'll do this one. I'm happy to move this recommendation for the vet clinic.
Well, and how that ties together is that we're developing like crazy up in the East Hill and things like this. In fact, 3 reports in, we do have the capacity to do it while things are still going very well downtown. So it does relate. I'm going to call the question. All in favor? That's carried. I had something written out for additional business that I want to get now while Jackie's in the room, frankly. We just had something about Braemont with model homes. We've had a request to allow a planning application to add more development to a piece of property. Then, to take that next step, we've added something on 16th Street. I understand last Friday that the city building department or planning department, it's really planning, that building department that's issued the permit, but planning's been working on these plans for 6 months, 8 months, depending what the rush is and who's in a hurry. But they issued 4 building permits with construction value of $42 million, $42 million, 2 retirement homes and 7 townhouse units on 9th Avenue East. So, Council, this is what we've been talking about for 6 years and wanting. And we're so lucky to have the staff that are able to pull it together and sometimes under pressure. I've talked to a couple of developers that we're turning around site plans in number of months, that they are a number of years down south, and are amazed at the service they're getting in On Sound and how quickly we're able to do it. So to the planning staff, to Pam, your department, congratulations on that. Those are huge numbers that almost shocking to see all at once. So can you do that? Can you double that for next week? Go ahead, Pam.
Thank you, Worship. And I just want to acknowledge really, and I'm glad Jacqueline's here to hear Council's comments tonight, but I want to acknowledge the work of the development team that starts with our city manager. It's led by our community planner, manager planning, Amy Can, but it includes Dennis and his team and Kate and her team. And you talk about economic development and Council, it's that team approach. It's that development team that's making that work. So thank you for your comments. And it's been 20 years as long as I've been here.
And we all remember when you had to come to the planning counter to go up to the building up in 16th Street to engineering and then come back to the planning department. And it's great to see planning and the engineering department side by side and making use of that high, long table on Fridays at noon hour, especially being together. Councillor Tam, I think you had your hand up, or go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to echo that, Ms. Coulter, but I do have a couple questions that citizens have asked me from time to time. And as you know, there's 2 undeveloped properties yet, or half developed. I'm talking about the Sydenham and another building closer to the Bayshore. I'm just wondering, my understanding is it's not your job. In fact, you have no entitlement to demand proof of perfect funding to the end of the project for these sorts of developments. Can you speak to that briefly?
Go ahead.
Through your worship, in a general way, the process and the agreements that council often authorizes for different developments, whether that be a site plan, a servicing agreement, a subdivision agreement, they're all structured with security that, and that security is really geared to protecting the interests of the city and the taxpayer. So sometimes, the Vandoler development recently, they're posting letters of credit, cash money, to secure that they're going to do the servicing work in a way that is consistent with the city's engineering standards and practices, but in a way that protects the taxpayer should a developer, any developer, walk away, the city would have the funds to complete that project. I won't speak generally, but I know, I know money is hard, commercial money is hard to get, but we do try our best to protect the interests of the taxpayer and also to work with developers.
Great, thank you. We'll move on to the agenda. The next one is something to do with facades downtown.
Thank you, Worship.
Sorry, we need a vote.
Now I can go to 12J is the facade grant.
Thank you, Worship. Jonathan Sawchuk has submitted an application for a facade and structural improvement grant at 920 2nd Avenue East on behalf of Bear Birch, which is a store in the downtown. This, as Councillor Gregg pointed out, this has come straight to council. They have commenced demolition and they're anxious to commence the eligible work under the program. The property is located on the west side of 2nd Avenue East in the 900 block in the heart of our downtown. It's to have a strong pedestrian environment and a consistent commercial character along that strip. The proposed work on the facade includes reconstructing the front facade with a new structural framing, glazing, and a new storefront, as well as an apartment entrance doorway, and bringing that storefront closer to the street. Right now, it's quite an alcove. Installing new windows on the upper facade, installing signage and exterior lighting, and fascia sign and gooseneck lighting, that is, as well as aluminum cladding of the cornice. This store has been vacant since 2013, and a structural engineer was retained to evaluate and provide recommendations on the structural elements. A new steel structural beam will be installed and the appearance of the facade will be recreated with thermal glazing units with dark brown aluminum frame. The clerk just wants to go to some of those window pictures that are illustrative of what the windows, yeah, there you go, will look like. Thank you. Reducing the depth of that entrance alcove and orienting the storefront and the apartment entrance towards 2nd Avenue will result in a stronger presence in keeping with a more traditional commercial facade. The above work will result in a major facade improvement and will address life safety and major structural deficiencies that are consistent with the guideline for the facade program. Staff are recommending approval subject to the conditions outlined in Schedule E.
Great, thank you. Deputy Mayor O'Leary, did you want to speak?
Thank you, Your Worship. I won't repeat all that, but I will move the recommendation.
Point made. Any further discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. So over to 12K. Deputy Mayor O'Leary, do you have a report from Grey County and or Grey Bruce Board of Health?
I do. Thank you, Your Worship. Just one item regarding Grey County Council. I'm sure most have read about the settlement between Saugeen Ojibwa Nation and Grey County, but in the spirit of reconciliation, it is well worth repeating. The settlement includes the transfer of 275 acres of land in Georgian Bluffs, known as Mountain Lake. Both sides are happy to move forward as this claim began some 25 years ago. From the health unit, we continue to have full control over the outbreak in Grey Bruce County. As of September 27th, 2020, in Grey Bruce counties, a total of 139 cases, 6 active cases, 0 cases currently hospitalized, 0 deaths, and 1 facility in COVID-19 outbreak. 0 schools in outbreak, 0 daycares in outbreak. Working with all schools in Grey Bruce to ensure safe school reopening, public health has been actively engaged in a number of activities to support school reopening in our region. Activities to date. It is important to point out that the assessment centers are operated by hospitals, not by public health. Grey Bruce Health Unit has been providing medical directive to long-term care and retirement home facilities that require this support to allow for testing in these facilities. Grey Bruce Health Unit also has deployed and continue to deploy staff in the field to ensure testing of vulnerable populations, such as on both reserves and shelters, among others. The medical officer of health has directed and supported Grey EMS with medical directive to provide COVID testing over the past months. EMS started to provide testing to first responders. Dr. Ara has shared with the board recently, the Council of Medical Officers of Health provided a letter to advise the provincial decision makers to limit testing to two main categories: people with symptoms or exposure. The recent announcement reflecting this advice has the potential to decrease in demand on the ACs or assessment centers. Continue consultation meetings with local school boards and school officials from all schools in Grey and Bruce. Scheduling for several communication sessions on safe school reopening. The first round has already been completed with parents, foster parents, and school staff. Mask use in public places. A decision was taken that the masking bylaw discussion is not going to proceed at the Grey and Bruce councils at this time. The considerations around implementation were becoming very complex. Continued communication with the public and stakeholders to ensure sustaining the optimal participation in the use of masks to reduce the risk of virus transmission. With that, Your Worship, I would not proceed those two reports.
Great, thank you. Anyone have any questions for Deputy Mayor O'Leary on that? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor of receiving those, and that is carried. We're down to the consent agenda, so I'll ask Deputy Mayor O'Leary to take the chair.
Okay, item 13, consent agenda. Brianna.
Through you, Deputy Mayor O'Leary. On the consent agenda this evening is a report on Georgian Bluff zoning bylaw amendment and a report on a request for second extension of draft plan approval for Georgian Shores Estates. There are minutes for receipt from the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority, Owen Sound Housing Company, and the Owen Sound Municipal Nonprofit Housing Corporation. Business licenses were issued to Cannabis Grey Bruce at 236 8th Street East and Highmark Mechanical located at 2045 20th Ave East, Units 16 and 17. Lastly, there is the information package. A full listing is available at 13I.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councillor Merton, you have the motion.
Moved by myself that City Council receives item 13A to 13I on the consent agenda dated September 28, 2020, and further that the recommendations contained in items 13A and 13B be approved.
Thank you. And all in favor? That's carried.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor O'Leary. In that consent agenda, I note that there are 4 sets of minutes from the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority. Councillor Gregg, do you want to give us a synopsis?
Thanks, Mayor Body. Obviously, the first couple of months were heavily impacted by the onset of COVID, and we started moving a little bit more directionally forward in June as things started to open up. There's a couple things I'd like to point out for council within the minutes. We undertake at the Conservation Authority 25, I think it is, sub-watershed report cards each year, the first of which came forward in, I think it was July, and it's the Bothwell Creek report card. This sub-watershed ranges from about halfway through Superior Street along the easterly fringe of Owen Sound. The watershed discharges at Leith. The analysis of the Bothwell Creek watershed indicates that scores of B or good, A for stream health, B for, well, jeepers, I think I've noted, I think we're A's on those actually. Regardless, we've scored extremely well for stream health, forest conditions. Wetland conditions are somewhat of a concern, and of note, the wetland cover is at 3% with a recommended average or coverage at 10%. Once wetlands, these also being our natural infrastructure, are gone, it is extremely difficult to get it back, and may I add, expensive. Much of the watershed is identified as highly vulnerable aquifer in terms of water drinking quality, including that which occupies within the city limits. Much of this area is karst topography, which contributes to that, along with soils. So this is a very interesting bit of information that is quite relevant to the residents of Owen Sound. A lot of the watershed covers a large area, but this one hits right at home. So we can always keep note of our decision-making process and the decisions that we're doing and how they would be impactful to sub-watersheds within our municipality. Also to note is despite a very slow start in terms of travelers and usage of Conservation Authority properties, once the properties were open during the summer, the traffic has it's been extremely it's placed quite a strain on many of the properties. Individuals are familiar with a lot of people from parts of Ontario going to Collingwood, actually starting with Saga Beach and then working their way westerly through Collingwood and ending up at various Conservation Authority properties, even Kelso Park here in Owen Sound, where we're getting this influx of tourists. So parking revenues positively have been strongly recipient of all the travel, but it is placing an extra strain on the Conservation Authority properties. Last year, we began the process of undertaking a Inglis Falls management plan. That's still ongoing this year, and we've also then committed to starting a Eugenia Falls management plan, which will be, I think, starting this fall. So these are plans that we're looking to implement in terms of being able to protect and preserve and allow the properties to be enjoyed by so many people. So any questions, we'd be glad to answer.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Next, we have about 12 sets of minutes, I think, from the two housing boards. Councillor Merton, nothing to update us on?
Yes, through your worship. So from item 13D, E, F, and G, the minutes are there for the meetings that we've been having in spite of COVID. In summary, however, I just would like to say that the third and final phase for the Odawa Heights development is a 60-unit apartment complex. In mid-August, the board reviewed the tender submissions and the contract was awarded to Allen Hastings Limited. The site of the apartment complex has been fenced by the contractor with hopes that some of the field and excavation work will commence before the snow flies, and it is anticipated and very hopeful that occupancy will occur in early 2022. I'm happy to answer any questions, but otherwise the minutes are there for your review.
Questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. I think that takes us over to part 14 of our agenda, and at 14A we have Community Services Committee.
Thank you, Your Worship. Community Services Committee of September the 16th. There was a presentation from the Grey Bruce Health Unit regarding Sharps disposal kiosks. These Sharps needle kiosks, they're secure and they're saying it's ideal for sharp waste in public areas and drop-off centers. Just some of the main details of the proposal is Grey Bruce Health Unit will provide a Sharps disposal kiosk to the city for the pilot project, which is a current cost of over $2,000. Location for the kiosk will be determined by the city in conjunction with police services, and the city will pay for replacement bins as needed based on the usage, which is a cost of $500. Health unit can pay for the disposal costs, and there are other details, but those are the main highlights of that particular item. Also, there was a verbal report from the Senior Manager of Property and Parks and Open Space regarding the Farmers Market washroom Sharps container. And to highlight there, in September 2020, staff installed a more robust, vandal-proof Sharps disposal unit. Since the unit was installed, there have been no staff incidents reported. Under Parks and Cemetery, the manager spoke about the Kelso Beach waterfront, and he advised that due to exceptionally high water levels in 2019 and more severely in 2020, the stormwater overflow channel, the shoreline and storm outflow have substantially sustained damage at Kelso Beach Park. City's Public Works and Engineering Division are leading restoration of the stormwater outflow channel and grading in around the amphitheater. Funds have been already set aside in the 2020 capital budget of $150,000 for that work, and then $5,000 for undertaking the amphitheater grading project to create a positive drainage away from the front of the stage towards the beach. Sections of the asphalt waterfront trail at Kelso Beach Park have been undermined and collapsed, resulting from shoreline wave actions, and also remain closed. As part of the 2021 capital budget, deliberations, a proposal for waterfront trail restoration and protection will be brought forward for Council's consideration. Facilities booking coordinator provided a report on the Owen Sound minor sports groups regarding 2019-2020 canceled ice, and each organization worked hard to only book ice that was going to be used by that organization, which allowed available ice to be rented out and other users, and reduced the amount of lost revenue at the Bayshore and the Julie MacArthur Regional Rec Center. The junior planner tonight identified the draft community improvement plan, which was also a topic discussed at that meeting. And under heritage, there was a facade and structural improvement discussion regarding 935 2nd Ave West, which is the Wright House. And also, I would ask if the Director of Corporate Services would discuss the public engagement strategy for the historic courthouse and jail.
Through you, Your Worship, I bet Miss Allen would love to talk about that, but I did come prepared to. No, but teasing Kate. So the city has been seeking adaptive reuse project for the former Grey County courthouse, and council is considering various options with respect to the removal of parts of the jail and is looking for input from the public on the various options. So on the city's main website, there's a tile that's dedicated to the courthouse and jail project. On there, there's a tremendous amount of information, the Cultural Heritage Evaluation Report and the HIA, or the Heritage Impact Assessment. All the staff reports and presentations are there. So there's two ways to participate. One, you can watch an online video, and we heard committee, the video's been shortened to just 5 minutes. So watch that video and complete an online survey. I would note already this morning we had 72 responses to the survey, so thanks to the public who have already joined in. If you do that, you watch the video and you think, well, jeepers, before I fill out the survey, I'd like a little bit more discussion and dialogue, we would invite you to attend an open house and question and answer session at the Bayshore Community Center on October 22nd. We would ask, due to current restrictions, that you would call or email Stacey Landry in our Community Services Department to register for that meeting, and all the information on how to do that is on the website.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just one more thing, kudos on the success of the Music at the Market, the free events that have been taking place. I know they've been very popular, and the series isn't over, right? No, it continues. Thank you. With that, Your Worship, I'll move the approval of these minutes.
Thank you. Any questions for Councillor Koepke? Councillor Gregg?
Thanks, Mayor Boddy. I've got questions for the Director of Community Services. I was on the website, and I think the recommendation in the minutes is excellent, to shorten the video. However, what's missing, I thought, from the video is we're aware of it as councillors, the background study, but there's no acknowledgement in the short video of the costs with each option. So I think you mentioned 72 people have filled out the survey. 72 people, I don't know if they might have been under the impression that it's the cost is all equal, and I'd love to acknowledge that money was endless and we could do whatever we wish, but that's simply not the way it is. So I think we should have the costs, or confirm for me the costs are there, but I couldn't find them when I went through the survey and through the options and watched the video. And secondly, on the survey, it's anonymous, and I was wondering why we would maintain anonymity on this. You can go back in, you can delete your cookies, and then you could do the survey again. So you can kind of load it. And I'm just wondering why we don't ask for a name then in the same format we would at a public meeting. Somebody has to come in and they provide their name for us.
Ms. Coulter?
Through your worship, perhaps I'll tackle the cost question. It's one actually we talked about both with planning and heritage staff as well as with the senior leadership team. And when you're looking at the options and the heritage impact assessment and the cultural heritage evaluation, really cost isn't to be the first and foremost consideration. So if you look at the website that's dedicated under staff reports and presentations, the report is there, CS20-031, has the costing estimate relating to the 4 options, plus a 5th option. So those are there. When Community Services Committee is considering those options, that will be important when council considers the options, the heritage impact assessment of those options, public input will all be sort of mixed into your consideration. But at this point, and given how the Ontario Heritage Act is structured, we thought it was best to do the consultation without those costs, but they are there in that report and they've been provided to committee. I would maybe defer the question on the collection of information to the clerk if that's appropriate.
Through you, your worship, I apologize, but I haven't been through the questions on the survey. So depending on what information you're looking for, whether there was a question about what municipality they reside in, maybe they could get that information through that without having the use of their name. But we could suppress the name information from any public report should that information be published at a later date.
Go ahead, Pam.
Through you, worship, the survey does ask if you're a resident of Owen Sound or not, so it will report whether you're a resident, but does it mean you couldn't have the same person do the survey several times? You could.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. I just wondered, why we don't collect a name just as an additional step in an instance like this. So, and then also, I know the costs are on the website, which is good, but I just thought that most people, they're just going right to the survey. They're watching the quick video and maybe perhaps the cost could have been on the little slides in the video, but that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I think I still need to call the question. It was Marion that moved the report for approval. So all in favor? That is carried. Down to 14B, which is minutes from Economic Development and Tourism Advisory Committee. Councillor Thomas.
Thanks, Your Worship. This was the first meeting of the committee. We didn't quite get there prior to the quarantine, so first meeting. So we did have a look at the 2020 work plans for the department. For me, the highlight of the meeting was a presentation from BC Hughes. You may recall that we had a discussion at council not too long ago about the need to move forward with all of the people that are trying to flee the city and move to beautiful places like Owen Sound. And BC Hughes presented to us their idea for a campaign to attract that market. It builds on the very successful Are You Most campaign, and it'll capitalize on a sector of people looking to relocate, recognizing the emerging trend of a permanent work from home workforce in some sectors of the economy. And the idea was to separate Owen Sound from other municipalities that are also looking at exactly the same thing. So in terms of Owen Sound, we're going to distinguish ourselves by leveraging attractive real estate pricing and space available here, highlighting lifestyle opportunities, promoting that Owen Sound has all the big city amenities on a small scale, and point out that the city is set to prosper, and question why would anyone ever want to live in a big city anymore. And perhaps the city manager could speak to this better than I could, because it's been many years since I lived in a big city. I love living in Owen Sound. You know, they're going to, through the campaign, position Owen Sound as the work from home capital of Canada. And I think that's a really nice, got a really nice ring to it, having worked from home for 34 years. So that to me was the main highlight of the meeting. And we did have an excellent presentation from the junior planner on the draft community improvement plan. That was it. So with that, Your Worship, I will move acceptance of those minutes.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. Now we have minutes from Operations Committee from September 8th.
Thank you, Your Worship. We received a quick update on the 10th Street Bridge reconstruction. There was also discussion about the old storage shed at the airport has finally been demolished. Yeah, new options are being looked at. Crack sealing of the runway has proven difficult because of a lack of contractors willing to do the work. And as you might expect, fuel sales were down significantly over the first 6 months of the year. If I recall correctly, there's 4 categories of fuel that's sold at the airport, and I believe 2 out of the 3 in April and May were down well over 10,000 liters. Am I right about that, Dennis? There you go. We also are recommending that council authorize mayor and the clerk to execute the street sweeping agreement and winter road maintenance agreement with Greg County. This is the agreement we have that we're asking to be renewed, which does the county pays the city to street sweep and plow county roads within city limits for a fee, of course. And that was it, Your Worship. And I would move receipt.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Last at 14D, minutes from the Tom Thompson Art Gallery Advisory Committee on September 1st, 2020. Councillor Dodd, do you want to present those?
Thank you, Worship. Yes, so we'll just touch base on a couple of things from the curator's report. One of the biggest ones was, I know Mayor Body, you mentioned this in the past. The gallery was visited by Lisa McLeod on August 13th, which is a great thing. Lisa McLeod is the Minister of Heritage, Sport, Tourism, and Culture. So we were fortunate to have Lisa walk around and take a view of our gallery and see some of our plans for future capital projects potentially. I wanted just also touch base on 3 fundraisers that are going on within the gallery. First off, everyone will remember when Councillor Thomas was a great spokesperson for the sale of the Tom Thompson calendar. We can report that those calendars raised $10,000. So you were a great spokesperson, Councillor Thomas, and so you should keep that up. I don't know if that's a side job you can get into. Another fundraising item that has came up is actually selling non-medical face masks. These were actually being done from overstock tea towels that they had in the gift shop, and all the gallery volunteers had sewn them into new masks that were able to be sold for volunteer or fundraising funds, which is a fantastic idea. Finally, there's also an online fundraiser going to be coming up. It's called a Grouping of 7, and which will feature a selection of 7 regional artists whose work will be up for auction, and 40% of those sales will go back to the gallery. So gallery is still working hard to do some fundraising. Obviously, as every other department has, it's been hit just as much as other departments regarding with COVID. So with that, Your Worship, I'll move approval of these minutes.
Okay, any questions for Councillor Dodd? Call the question. All in favor? That's carried. I did note that there's a great write-up on the Tom Thompson Art Gallery, and the artist that's in there from Saugeen First Nation named Emily Kiwashig. Good write-up in the Star on the weekend. promoting the gallery and promoting her work. So it's kind of nice to see. Let's get a bit of provincial attention. Next on the list, number 15. Did I call the question? I did. Next, number 15, matters that are postponed, and we have none. Motions for which notice was previously given. We have none. We're down to additional business. Councillor Tamming was first on the list.
Point of order, Your Worship. I fear that there may be things in this so-called open letter that could be reference to identifiable individuals. It could also contain personal information. I don't think this is the correct forum for the presentation of a correspondence item, and I would ask the clerk to advise on that.
Thanks. First, I'm going to look at the procedural bylaw that sets out the procedures of what we should be doing. And I note under Part 4, Conduct of Meetings, number 91 or paragraph 91, Conduct of Council. Members of council shall govern themselves according to the council's code of conduct.
That's exactly the point of my letter, is to call certain councillor to the code of conduct.
Hold on, please. As I look in the code of conduct, I'm looking at part 12, which is respectful workplace. Members are governed by the city's workplace violence, harassment, and sexual harassment policy. All members have a duty to treat members of the public, one another, and staff appropriately and without abuse, bullying, or intimidation, and to ensure that their work environment is free from discrimination and harassment. At number 72, all complaints received involving members under workplace violence, harassment, sexual harassment policy shall be referred to the Integrity Commissioner for processing in accordance with both the said policy and the Code of Conduct complaints procedure. And then there's a part B under the Code of Conduct for members of council, local boards and committees. There's a formal complaint procedure. Initial complaint, request for an investigation of a complaint that a member has contravened the code. The complaint shall be sent directly to the Integrity Commissioner by email, substantially in the form attached to this procedure, Schedule A. All complaints shall be submitted by an identifiable individual, which includes the authorized signing officer of an organization. Complaint shall set out grounds. Classification by the Integrity Commissioner. It seems to me, Councillor Tamming, that reading the Code of Conduct and the procedural bylaw, that the proper forum would be through the Integrity Commissioner if you wish to make a complaint about the conduct of one of your fellow councillors.
I'm tired of his bullying, and I believe that for us to have to incur another $10,000 on the Integrity Commissioner office would be a great.
Excuse me, Your Worship. Is the councillor just going to go ahead with his presentation despite the fact that you've just made a ruling on it?
Again, Councillor Tamming, I think the appropriate place is through the Integrity Commissioner. And those are the rules of the the procedural bylaw and the Code of Conduct that we have before us. So it's pretty difficult for me to come with any kind of ruling otherwise.
I will take the necessary steps outside of this forum. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kepke?
On the MRI, Your Worship?
Yes.
Okay. Some council members and the city manager had an opportunity to view the new MRI machine at the hospital. The foundation office staff, as well as some technicians in that area and the director in that particular area, showed us the new MRI, which is certainly exciting to see. Operations are going to be starting very soon with that. They're going to integrate, I think, within maybe another week, and then slowly decommission the old MRI. So thanks were certainly extended to the city for their contribution towards that, and they showed us recognition that the city has been given a plaque on a door and so on. And for those of you who've been in the MRI machine before, just to let you know, the new one is 10 centimeters larger in circumference. May not sound like much, but I think it really has made a big difference. So it certainly was exciting to see that new piece of equipment at the hospital.
And thank you to you, Deputy Mayor O'Leary, and I think Councillor Merton, that I got busy at work and stuck and couldn't get there. So thank you for
And
going
city
on behalf
manager.
of the city. On my list, I note that at sundown tonight ended Yom Kippur, which started at sundown the night before, which is a Jewish, one of the Jewish community's sacred holidays. We send our best wishes for a happy, healthy, and peaceful year. Mar Chatama Tova, and I'm probably not pronouncing it very well. To understand in English means, may you be sealed in the book of life. We have a synagogue in this town that has been here for our entire life, and I understand that it's either the smallest city in Canada that still has a synagogue or one of them. So it's we've had a long history of a Jewish community in Owen Sound. So it was that special holiday for them. Congratulate all people who and all businesses that won the Sun-Times Reader Choice in the business community. We're happy here at Owen Sound to see Harrison Park chosen as the 2020 Sun-Times Platinum Reader's Choice for Best Campground. And I don't know how we've placed other years, but boy, we've put a lot of work into that campground to try and make it better, and I think that's showing. Yep, I've covered that already. Was the building department with 4 building permits for a total of $42 million being issued in Owen Sound. And also market concerts. If you go to music at the market, one word.ca, you can see what the concerts are. They are 12 till 2, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I've been noting a couple of hundred people, 50, 7,500 people out to concerts. Got the masks here to advertise music at the market. It is a great program, and it's great to see a lot of people out. I'm not wearing my mask for the simple reason that some people know former real estate agent Alan Krimble sold this for me as a gift, thinking that I looked bad past meetings with a paper one on that didn't fit. So I thank her for that, and that's the reason why I don't have the music at the market one on. So with that, I think that concludes everything I wanted to hit tonight. So we're looking at number 18 motion.
Moved by myself that the committee of the whole rise and report.
All in favor? That is carried. And so we're back into the formal session. Go ahead.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Tamming, that the action taken in committee of the whole in considering public meetings, deputations and presentations, public question period, matters arising from correspondence, reports of city staff, consent agenda, committee meetings, committee minutes, matters postponed, motions for which notice was previously given, and additional business be confirmed by this council.
Great, thank you. All in favor? That is carried. Are there any notices of motion? Seeing none. Bylaws, Ms. Bloomfield?
Through your worship, the bylaws listed for approval on tonight's agenda include the confirmatory bylaw, a bylaw to govern the proceedings of council and committees, a bylaw to execute a facade and structural improvements agreement with Patrick Burke for property at 935 2nd Ave West, a bylaw to establish development charges for Owen Sound, a bylaw to execute a site plan agreement with Ann Pent Realty Limited for Block 7 of East Court Residences, a bylaw to execute a lease agreement with Owen Sound Flight Services, Inc., respecting premises at the Billy Bishop Regional Airport, and a bylaw to establish Owen Sound's response to the COVID-19 pandemic for August 22nd to September 25th.
Great, thank you.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Tamming, that bylaw numbers 2020-109, 2020-110, 2020-111, 2020-112, 2020-113, 2020-114, and 2020-115 be passed and enacted.
Thank you. Councillor Kepke, you've got your finger up.
I have a question on bylaw 2020-110, which is to govern the proceedings of council and committees. Is that respecting the housekeeping issues only?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Yes, with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? That has carried. So that completes our business for tonight. It is 9:25 p.m. Good night, everybody. Thanks.